We made a group of one. Last person who's applauded for everyone.
All right, guys, let's worm our way into the taxonomy of villains. What's more fun, writing about your heroes or writing about your villains? Let's start in the middle. Julie, why don't you start this one?
Say it again, please.
Would you rather write heroes or villains? Which parts are more fun?
You can't have one without the other. So, the villains are more fun. But you can't let the villain overshadow your hero. And so there's a balance you have to strike between those two.
For me, I think writing the villains is more fun. I mean, in terms of the character work that they get to do, because you can have a villain do absolutely anything.
Yeah.
Heroes can't do absolutely anything. They have to stay between the lines. The villains, though, yeah. On the other hand, though, you don't get to torture villains as much, so it's not as satisfying.
Yeah, I find that I'm writing like a team of heroes against one villain. So the villain needs to be more powerful, but I just seem to be spending more time on the heroes. And also, if they're questing to find the villain and the villain is a mystery, even if we get to go to the villain's head, we're just going to spend a lot more time with the heroes.
So it's really important to get the right proportions in a story. Villains are like dessert. They're super fun, they're super delicious, but if all you have is that, you kind of get sick to your stomach. And you need that wholesome, whole wheat hero stuff in order to make the villains really shine and really be awesome. If all you had was Darth Vader storming down the halls, killing people, believe it or not, you would get bored, no matter how good that scene in Rogue One is. You need Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia and Han Solo doing their hero thing so that Vader can just loom and be menacing and be that really cool villain. And that's true for any type of villain-hero relationship, whether it's in film or print or whatever you have. Make sure you have them in the right proportions, or else your audience is going to get sick of it.
All right, so when do you start figuring out what kind of villains you're going to have? Do you start with your story? Do you work on those villains right at the beginning? Or do you work out what kind of story you're going to have and then say, all right, I've got this story, now what kind of villain is there? Do you have the villain first, or does the villain come after you've got your whole plot figured out?
I'll take this one. I think you have to establish your conflict first. Because if you're writing man versus nature like The Martian, there's not a villain per se. Mars is the villain if there is one at all. So you're really going to have to establish, what does my character want, my main character? What is preventing them from getting it? And if there is a person who is doing the preventing, then you have the possibility of a villain. And then you can work on what that relationship is and figure out if you really need a villain there or if you want something a little more complex.
I don't know. This whole villains have to be in proportion thing, I think we can hold up Game of Thrones like that. Which is basically just nothing but villains, and some of them you like a little more than the others, But
It's okay,
I mean, you do have that saying, white bread has to be in there somewhere. I will give you that. Yeah, Captain White Bread has to be around somewhere.
Yeah, it really, for me, it depends on the story itself, what I'm starting with. If I'm writing in an already established universe, then I have to I've got my heroes already, and I need to figure out what villain I'm going to bring in that will be the big bad there. If I'm starting from scratch, then it's really a more organic process where it just depends on what the plot buddy is hopping around in my head.
As people said, sometimes there might not be a villain at all, and it comes down to, your original concept, your one-sentence plot summary. A character is somebody who wants something, and circumstances might be blocking them, like they need to earn money or something, or yes, a supervillain might be blocking them or going for the same item. I started one story off there's a teenage girl who basically has the Dark Lord inside her head. So there, I had a villain straight off. And other times, the villain has shown up only at the end, and sometimes not been very well realized.
Okay, first, I really like the concept of the plot bunny. That's not what I've heard before.
Our plot bunnies have fangs.
Points for plot bunny. All right, and I definitely agree with Daniel on the whole idea of balance here. But if you're gonna have a balanced villain with your protagonist, is it better to have a villain that has similar abilities to your protagonist, like magic user versus magic user? Is it better to have something that's completely different? Do you want it to be a villain that's so much more powerful than your protagonist that, you know, the idea that they can come out ahead is nigh on impossible? Or, you know, do you want them to be equally matched? Discuss, come up with some stuff, guys.
I've just checked with Kevin Feige, and he says the only thing you can do is have the same as the hero, at least in the first story. But then after that, you can branch out. So, there you go.
Well, and he's God, so.
I think the answer to that depends on what kind of emotional resonance, what kind of tone of story you're going for. If you want things to feel really, really desperate, you want a super overpowered villain. You want, you know, the Independence Day aliens against 20th century Americans who have no chance, because it creates that sense of desperation throughout. If, on the other hand, you want a climactic showdown, something like the sheriff and the outlaw on the western street about to have the quick draw thing, then they gotta be evenly matched. And so it depends on what kind of emotion you want people to feel in your climax.
Well, I write about the heroine's journey, and what I chart out over and over is the heroine has to, and yeah, this works for boys too, but anyway, I see more in the girl stories. The heroine has to train with the supervillainess and absorb some of her qualities, and this works because they're so wildly different, but as the heroine is apprenticing, she is learning some of the qualities. Alice in Wonderland 2010, she's in the Red Queen's palace, working for her, trying out being her, deciding how many qualities like this she wants to absorb. Lyra and her mother in Golden Compass, which is a similar apprenticeship to Snow White and her wicked stepmother. You've got the moment where Ursula is telling the Little Mermaid, this is how to attract a guy. You clearly don't know how. You really need at least a little training to go in and do this. So the whole point is a complete opposite, not just skill set, but also mindset, that the heroine has never even considered doing anything like this.
So you're saying there's psychological aspects to consider, not just power on power.
Right, yeah, because, you know, if your villain has a completely different skill set than your hero does, then your hero has to be really creative in coming up with ways to defeat the villain. And so that could be tons of fun.
What is Batman going to do against somebody as chaotic, ridiculous, and perky as Joker?
Yeah.
Come on, tell me more. You mentioned something about, you know, emotional climaxes. That sounds good. Talk about that.
Okay. Well, I'll go and talk about one of my favorite villains here to see what we can get out of it. I love Golden Cot from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, because he has such a long arc. He takes 7 seasons to get from like the old oppressor who we just kicked out all the way to his final status as the emissary of the pod race. If you haven't seen it, just watch it. It's awesome. The point is that
7 seasons. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yes, just watch it. Jim Butcher told you to. So what's nice about having a villain that is recurring rather than constant is that he gets to have a lot of different kinds of beats. And as you go through the series, he goes from somebody who is somewhat annoying and just sometimes there, to somebody who is a real military threat, to someone who is apparently defeated for a little while, and to somebody who is, for a little bit, even working with the good guys. and shares their goals in kind of an alliance of convenience. And it's really interesting to see that kind of character development go through, because you get to hit lots of emotional beats with them. And if you have a long series that you're working on and you want to have somebody like go through lots of different places, that's a really good way to go. You can start with somebody who's part of the group, goes away from the group for a little while, kind of comes back, and eventually becomes the arch villain that nobody expected to see coming. You can do lots of fun things if you have lots of time to play with a character. And that's what I love about Ducat.
Yeah, Ducat was solid, although he's not my favorite. That would have to go to Londo Mollari from Babylon 5. He was such a fabulous villain that most people will argue with me about whether or not he was a villain. That's how good he was. But at the end of the day, Londo Mollari is the guy whose choices and decisions drive absolutely everything bad that happens in the story. I mean, you take Londo out of that story and nothing happens. He's the villain. He's the one who moves it along. He doesn't even know himself he's the villain part of the time. Although once he does realize it, it's like, oh yeah, he sees what's coming. It's like, oh, he's self-aware. I love that in a villain.
Yeah, that's a great example, because you sympathize with him, and as he's saying, I'm doing this for my people, but he keeps reaching these points where he doesn't realize he's crossed the line until it's revealed to him that he's crossed the line, or one of his victims comes to him and says, yeah, we were childhood best friends, but actually you screwed over my entire family, and problem.
Oh, that was a great heroic moment, though. I mean, he was a tragic hero in that one, because he goes and kills his friend and then adopts his family to protect them. But at the end of the day, dude, you killed your friend. It's like, it was my only choice. It's like, no. And they tell him that in season 1. There's always a choice. We only say there's no choice when we've already made the choice, and we just don't want to admit that we made a choice. And that gets pointed out early on, and then it drives Londo. That's what drives Londo all the way through the story. I mean, yeah, he's an amazing villain. I mean, the heroes were very good, because we had Captain Whitebread, Sheridan, and etc. You had your standard spread of good guys for the most part, but Londo was an extraordinary villain, and that's what really made the series. And the fact that they put him across from Jakar, who was another villain, but Jakar was Londo's mirror. He was the one who turned aside, who stopped and went, whoa, wait a minute, we've got to do this differently. They showed you, because Londo and Jakar were the same character, essentially. Right up until they got to that point, and Londo goes this way, Jakar goes that way, but they still wind up being friends. Straczynski is just a damn genius. He really is. He's completely underestimated.
Well, and we like to say that every villain is the hero of his own story, and so if you can make the reader understand and even sympathize with his motivations while going, oh dude, no, why did you do that, to get to that goal, then you get that emotional gut wrench that you're going for.
One fun example of this is Dan Wells' Extreme Makeover Apocalypse Edition, totally told from the point of view of the villain who thinks he's the hero the whole time and thinks he is going to fix everything, and everything he does makes it worse, until eventually you get to the end of the world through cosmetics. It's exactly that.
Catwoman tried that, it just didn't.
Catwoman was less incompetent than this guy, and that makes a difference.
Okay, you seem to have hit a good beat there. Who else has come up with really, really good villains that have hit that wonderful sweet spot without quite overshadowing the heroes to the point where they're just not there anymore?
Well, Adolf Hitler did some.
In fantasy.
I kind of liked, okay, this is just a light, silly one, but Iron Man 2, he's so incompetent that Iron Man just keeps going. You're a bee wannabe and you're not pulling it off. You're a bad inventor. You can't make an Iron Man suit. You're just this big joke. And so it doesn't always have to be Thanos. It could just be, oh, stop it, you little dweebling. Go away and stop stealing my stuff. Dr. Horrible. Ooh, Dr. Horrible is delightful and fun because yeah, we're watching him trying to be a good guy, or at least his Clark Kent side is a good guy, and he's trying to be a supervillain. And once again, what are the tests to be a supervillain, and do you have it in you? As he starts off by going, of course I'm not gonna kill a kid, sidekick, what's wrong with you? Who would do that? And then he finds that accidentally, totally accidentally, because the Captain Whitebread is arguably the bad guy, things devolve.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, that's just an example of how stupid is so much more dangerous and effective than evil. with Captain Hammer, he's just dumb. Sometimes that's worse than evil. I mean, especially if you've got like tons of power. You're a superhero powerhouse, and you're also a moron. That's possibly worse than villainy.
Speaking of Joss Whedon shows, one of my favorite villains ever is the Operative in Serenity. He is so good. And what makes him really interesting to me is that he is self-aware of how evil his actions are. He's the guy who doesn't skip a beat when Mal says, I don't kill children. This guy says, I do, if I have to. And he says, the things I do are evil, and I'm not going to live in this world that I want to create because I don't have a place there. I'm a monster. Yeah. But he believes completely that trying to get to that world, that doing these horrible things is right for the greater good. And the fact that this guy can believe so much that doing something that he recognizes as evil is actually the right thing to do, that is chilling to me, and I love that villain, the one who comforts you when he is killing you slowly. Like, oh my gosh, that is a villain right there. Yet, he does not overshadow the heroes, because all of the heroes in Firefly are so well defined and are such wonderfully complex people that you love so much that he fits in with that universe and he complements them rather than overshadowing them. And it's just a testament to the characterization that's going on in that show.
The religious fanatic, or the anything fanatic, Terry Pratchett had the Quisitor in the religious one.
Small Gods.
Yeah, the religious one. Small Gods. And yeah, yes, of course we're going to torture the science out of you, and of course the book says, and of course the joke is, he has found the one actual prophet of the God that he pays lip service to, and this kid actually believes in, but, the kid actually believes in truth and peace and honesty and being nice to your neighbors, so the Quisition can't have that.
Really, honestly, just anybody who gets to be the leader of a big group is probably a jerk. It's not for no reason. Jerks get things done. That's one of the things that makes people think they'd be good leaders.
As a counterexample to the question we're talking about, where the villain does, to me at least, overshadow the hero, is the Dark Knight. And I love the Dark Knight. But to me, the Joker is so on fire and so fascinating in his perverseness that Christian Bale's Batman, well played though it may be, is just kind of forgotten.
Yeah.
Doesn't count. That was Heath Ledger driving himself insane to reach the apex of his art.
Yeah. Just saying, that was an amazing performance.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
No, I mean, the way it was written, strictly speaking, the writing wouldn't have overshadowed. I don't think the character would have been overshadowed by the writing. It was all about the performances. I mean, because Bale, Bale he was okay. He was all right. He was a good Bruce Wayne and not as good at Batman.
Okay, try and just a little bit, reel it back in just a little bit to maybe some writing examples, good and bad, places where the villains have overshadowed the protagonists to the detriment of the writing, and maybe some examples where they didn't.
Well, it is my job to make sure that does not get to press. So I do my best to help authors realize that they have done this and to correct that before it would get published. I have certainly worked with some There was a project I had somewhere recently where there was a very standard mad scientist archetype, and oh gosh, where to begin? There's lots of ways to do this wrong. There are lots of ways to do this wrong. There's going too cliche. There's going so crazy that it's not even recognizable what the person's motivation is. There are more ways to do this wrong than it's possible for us to talk about in a panel here. And if you're worried about where yours is, find someone like me and we can let you know if you're on the right track.
It's something I do worry about in my own work. I'm doing a reading tomorrow at 3:15. Everybody should come. And I did a reading of this same thing at the previous convention I was at, and somebody said, you know, I think I almost like your villain more than I like your hero. And I'm like,
No, that's fine. The problem is when you know the villain kind of takes over the show when he's got more and better plot. That really becomes an issue. There's a number of books I've read where it's like, oh man, these villains are great. I just don't care about the heroes at all. You know, because the villains are much more interesting.
well, I think those are the books that I don't finish.
No, I've got this OCD thing once I get started.
I used to, and then I decided life was too short to finish a book that I wasn't enjoying. So.
Oh well. Discipline. You can learn from those incompetents. And nothing else what not to do. It's the least useful lesson of writing, but you know, but if you add enough of it up, eventually it'll probably be something good.
I'm clearly not the target audience, but I really did not like Rose and Jack in Titanic, so yeah, I was just sitting there going, you know, when is this doofus gonna get killed off?
I hated that movie so freaking much. So much.
It's okay. It
Oh,
didn't
don't
happen.
have
It didn't happen.
No, I decided not to consciously because it was so popular.
As far as writing, I was quite young, but I really struggled with the book Wicked, which, okay, the beginning premise is, what if the Wicked Witch had a lot more going on and is not just a Wicked Witch, and you know, who exactly is labeling her wicked? And it's this heavy political allegory, and it's very symbolic, so we really stay out of her head. And I was just reading it going, are we supposed to sympathize with her or not? I'm really unclear here, and all the symbolism is evil, and yet this is saying that, you know, it isn't fair that we're judging her this way, even though she's really monstrous. Where are we? The musical is a lot more clear-cut, and that may be why it really hit it off with people.
Something else to be very conscious of is to make sure that all of your characters are consistent, and villains are no exception to that. If they have a goal, they need to keep trying to get that goal, whether or not they suffer a setback or what have you. But if they go from, ooh, I want to control the world, to, oh, I'm only worried about this one person, to, I'm just trying to figure out the truth of the universe, that starts...
Too scattered.
Yeah, villains are in part villains because they have the discipline to get to their goal and do anything required to achieve it, including the evil things, which is what makes them a villain. If they didn't have those moral boundaries, they'd be heroes.
Okay, old school example. Roger Zelazny's Amber. The characters are all pretty much evenly balanced. They're all pretty much superpowered humans, for those of you who haven't read it.
Megalomaniacs! Oh my god!
And they all have pretty much the same goals. They all want to rule Amber. And they're all pretty much single-minded about it. But somehow he makes that work.
Well, he does because you like him. Well, because you start off with Corwin, and Corwin's not a megalomaniac. He's a blank slate. He doesn't know what he is. And mostly he makes decisions that you go, yeah, okay, I could follow along with that. That tracks. And plus he gets a cool rogue sidekick. That's always a good thing to get for a hero. So that makes him look a lot more heroic. But on the other hand, then he starts walking around. Let me just go to the reality where they're just waiting to go off to war for an apocalypse and for it to follow a god that looks just like me. And yep, found it. All right, let's go, boys. Who does that? Yeah, Corwin. Corwin does that.
Yeah.
I forget what the question is, but back to the really compelling heroes. I was at a Harry Potter con last weekend. Any idea how much Draco fanfic and how much Snape fanfic and how much nobody cares about Harry and Ginny getting together?
And that goes right back to writing compelling characters. She wrote Rowling writes characters that everybody likes, and somebody likes each one of them. She did her job well. She just got stuck in a rut of, she decided when she wrote the first book exactly how everything was going to end up. And when the story went somewhere else, she said, no, it's going to go here no matter what.
What's interesting to me about Harry Potter is how much more interesting the Draco and Snape are than Voldemort. Like, he's somewhat interesting when he's Tom Riddle, but once he's actually, made the decision, made the Horcrux, and become this other than human thing, he's a lot less interesting to me as a person. He's more just, an embodiment of a force. He's more just, this is my, avatar of evil, rather than an actual person.
He's a discount Sauron who has to do all the stuff himself.
Which bringing that in, to me, is why Saruman is more interesting than Sauron in The Lord of the Rings. Because he is more human and more relatable. And if you just have giant dark lord of evil who is this evil entity, that's a lot less interesting than a human person who is trying to do things. And who has some amount of limitations. I mean, one of Brandon Sanderson's laws is that limitations are greater than powers, and that applies to villains just as much as it does to heroes. Their limitations are what define them and what give them their palette of actions, their menu of choices. And if they don't have any limitations, then they already rule the world, and what's the point?
Aha. There was a point in there somewhere.
I will rebut that with Thanos.
But Thanos does have limitations.
good.
He has
Arguments.
self-imposed limitations. Once he did his snap, he got rid of the stones. That is a self-imposed limitation that led to his head getting
Yeah,
chopped
but I
off.
just saw Endgame a minute ago. So, as far, but if you look at Thanos in Infinity War, Infinity War Thanos, basically he's better than everybody, does whatever he wants, goes off and does it, and then wipes out half the universe. That's just, he was Superman for that story. I mean, and the great thing about that story is it's written from Thanos' point of view.
Yeah, he's actually he's the hero of that
Structurally speaking, Thanos is the hero of that story.
Mm-hmm.
He just happens to have had a really horrifying goal.
Yeah. Which he achieved.
Oh, yeah, which you got to. Well, and what the heroes generally do. By the end, but in the end, that's because that's what we're all waiting for. It's for the heroes to, make everything right again. They did an Endgame. I mean, what a glorious mess Endgame. Oh my goodness. There were parts of that movie I had no idea what was going on with all the various timelines, and it was just chaotic. And there were so many characters. Yes, this is what I wanted. Wong shows up at the end. Do you really want us to bring more? And the audience is like, yes! Moon Knight. Where's Moon Knight? Freaking Moon Knight.
What do you think about the timelines in that movie? Because your head will explode.
Yeah. I think it got so complicated that eventually the writing staff just went, how this works, right? It works, doesn't it? Yeah, sure it works.
Luckily, this is not the panel about temporal mechanics.
Yeah, well, we had that 3 hours ago and you missed it.
That's okay, it'll happen again 3 hours from now.
God, I love time travel.
I think the villain that I like the most that I've seen recently is Michael Keaton in Spider-Man. Michael Keaton as the Vulture in Spider-Man was an outstanding villain. That is a textbook how it should be done villain. If only because he was this guy who's completely understandable. You get him. He might be right. Sort of, you're looking at it, you're like, I'm not entirely sure he's in the wrong. I mean, by the time we're disintegrating people, yeah. But up until then, it was the guy who's, as the working guy got screwed over by the government. It's like, I could feel for that.
Well, it was also probably one of the best reveals they've ever done.
Oh, sure. Oh, that was amazing. And not only that, but then when he gets to the end, and when the other, when Scorpion comes up to him and starts talking to him, and he just looks back at him and goes, nah, I don't know who he is. Like that. Because, and you look at him and you know from the character there's two things operating. One, he owes the kid his life and he likes the kid because the kid is a working class punk like him. And two, nobody's going to kill Peter Parker except him. He's innocent himself. And you know that those things are sort of balanced in him. And you can tell that from the story that they've given us. Yeah, he's an amazing villain.
He is.
But on the other hand, I think they also did Peter Parker as a hero better than any of the heroes they've done in the Marvel Universe. Because at the end of things, most of the heroes are like, yeah, we killed the villain. Yeah, we fought him, killed him. You know, Spider-Man is like, yeah, I fought him, defeated him, jumped into the fire and saved him, brought him back out, and had him go to jail for the police. Maybe he'll turn a new leaf someday. You know, and it's like, damn, kid, yeah, that's how Spider-Man ought to be played. It's not good enough to win. You gotta win and then go save the bad guys.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, that's hero work. Well done.
I don't think the villain in the current Spider-Man works well.
I haven't seen it yet. Don't spoil it.
I won't.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Well, there's a lot of people that don't work as well as Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's hardly fair.
They're just an acting god.
He is amazing.
So good.
I want to see.
Reel it back in, guys. Reel it back in.
Right, sorry.
Stop talking about performances. We can talk movies later. All right. How about some? Come on, give me some more examples of either things that really work because things were balanced, like that, or things that just plain didn't because the bad guys were either so underpowered that you're wondering why the heroes are bothering, or so overpowered that you just didn't believe that the heroes could manage to defeat them.
All right, I have an example from literature. In Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series, the Wax and Lane books, we have a couple of different villains that happen in each book. But the one that I want to focus on is at the end of this most recent book, Wax has the opportunity to have a conversation with his planet's god. And he notices, hey, what's this dark thing over here that I can't really see? And the planet's god says, I don't know. And Wax is like, I should be scared. It's like, I feel like I'm really scared that you don't know that. And the god says, yes, you should be. And that to me is the best example I can think of right now where you have just this, you know, the presence, the evil presence is done really well. Where it's not trying to be a character, at least at this point. And it's really menacing because of the person that it has at the moment bewildered. And that is a really cool thing. And he doesn't spend a whole lot of time. He has just enough time to have that one amazing moment, which is set up with lots of little hints throughout the previous 3 books that this is a thing that could happen.
Yeah, he's really good at that.
Yeah. So, and to me, that moment is more memorable than the individual villains of the 3 books. And they weren't bad villains, but that was even more memorable to me.
Phantom of the Opera. Nobody wants Raoul to win.
Yeah, that's true. Loki, gotta love Loki. You know, I mean,
Loki is kind of sometimes a villain, sometimes the hero. I mean,
That would be Trickster, yes. The Trickster archetype.
yeah, Spike in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I would say Spike and Andrew Scylla as a unit were just amazing.
Yeah.
They were amazing villains.
Yeah.
Because they were fun and they had that one human element that you liked about them because they loved each other.
Yeah.
Or at least as close to it as soulless demons could be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's the thing about the big thing about villains is there almost always has to be something about that villain that's admirable.
Yeah.
If there's not a quality to your villain that is admirable, you're probably you're out further on a limb than you need to be. Because there's almost always something in the villain that you look at and go, oh yeah, I would like that, and then you go, oh wait, no, I wouldn't. He's awful. But a well-done villain almost always there's something admirable about him. I mean, look at Vader. Effective administrator, rapid promotion. You know, he had a lot of things going for it, but Vader got things done.
And plus 10 dexterity with a lightsaber.
Oh yeah. Well, he was hyper competent because when Vader showed up, things got wrecked. I mean, you knew awful things were going to happen after the first few times you saw Vader show up. It's like it kills the wizard, kills the good guy wizard. Oh no, shows up, shows up, captures everybody, no problem, wipes out Hoth base, no big deal. You know, effective administration during the Hoth attack for anybody who wasn't up to snuff. But yeah, but that was the great thing about Vader was he was not an absolute force, but super effective and never dumb.
All right, I think we've got a question.
Oh, I was just gonna add, the first season of Jessica Jones killed it.
Oh,
I heard him mention.
Oh, he's a villain you hate, you just hate. Not that you love to hate, you just hate him. But at the same
Some
time,
people argue with you about that.
Okay.
It's a big thing.
Turn on the blender. Now put your hand in slowly. Do I have your attention?
Well, and back to Jim's point about there has to be something admirable. One of the best lessons for both life and writing, I learned in The High King by Lloyd Alexander, which at the end of the book he says that, you know, you haven't defeated evil, you've defeated only the enchantments of evil, because within the hearts of every person are good and evil mixed. And you have to have that for both compelling heroes and compelling villains. A compelling hero needs that temptation to do something wrong. A compelling villain has that good thing about them that you like. That's not just competence necessarily, but you know, that almost redeeming quality that they actually went there. That could be something, and then they don't, and that's part of why they're a villain.
yeah, and you want to villainy and evil aren't the same thing. You know, and that's why a lot of writers, especially when you're learning writing craft, you know, teachers will insist on having them use the word protagonist and antagonist because you gotta figure out what's going on. You can have villains who are not at all evil, like Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive. Tommy Lee Jones is the villain in that thing. He's off pursuing the hero. He's after the good guy who's innocent, and if he catches him, he's going to put him in jail and he's going to get killed. That's a villain, but he's not evil. And the end, you know, the ending hasn't come around, which is what everybody wanted to see anyway.
Or he just doesn't care.
Yeah. But evil is something else. If you're writing an evil character, that's harder. I mean, let's just want to do cartoony evil. But if you want to do real evil is a hole inside you where your soul ought to be. You know, there's something in you that's just missing. And if you put your character together with a missing part, you know, he just has no empathy at all for other people. He doesn't care what happens to them, and that's all you need to do to turn him into a really evil person. So figuring out where the hole is in your villain is one of the fun things to do if you want to write that evil character. I mean, I write a lot of villains like in the Dresden Files, but not very many of them are really evil. Most of them are just greedy or obsessed or megalomaniac, you know, with something. But there's only a few of them that are actually, oh shit, there's something wrong with that guy. You know, that's the characters like Nicodemus. You know, I mean, he's flat out evil. He's the guy that I wanted to set out. He's Michael's opposite. You know, but anyway, sorry, I was going.
All right, we've got questions, I think, starting up front.
I like thinking of a villain who, not to be argumentative, but sort of breaks a lot of the things that you guys have suggested now. Gollum is not admirable, at least off the top of my head, the way I'm thinking of it. He isn't brave. He doesn't, I guess this sort of needed. But like, why is Gollum such a lasting villain? Because so many people point to him as a great character with depth, but how does he work?
I would argue that he is a great character, but not necessarily a villain.
Okay.
With 500 years old, you reach like a squid, you are not.
Because yeah, I mean, Gollum is extremely motivated to do his one thing, and yeah, he is willing to do just about anything to get it, but the constraints that are on him of, you know, following Frodo for so much of that time, and also he's not impeding the heroes during a lot of that time. He doesn't quite count as a villain to me. He's super interesting, he's fantastic, but not quite a villain. At most, in The Hobbit, he's an antagonist there briefly. And in that particular context, he is impeding Bilbo.
Well, I mean, Gollum's whole point is that you're right, he's not a villain, he's a slave.
Yeah.
You know, he's a slave to his addiction.
Yeah. We've seen him fall.
And
Yeah.
he's trying to recover his property.
Yeah, exactly. And that's understandable. And not only that, but he actually tries to get better. I mean, he makes an effort. After 500 years of misery, I mean, that's kind of admirable. And then he goes and he does all these horrible things, strangling people and so on. And then you go, okay, well, yeah, that's definitely a con. but that's what makes him a good character, though, is because there's so much of him that you can look at and you can empathize with and you can feel sorry for, and that's how he gets you.
But he's also the cautionary tale.
Yeah.
He's what will happen to Bilbo if he hangs on to
Yeah, you're right. He's Bilbo's future is what he is.
In your writing, have you guys had any cases where, like Jim, you've mentioned you like to torture your protagonist sometimes?
Like is not a strong enough word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you had a case where in your writing, in the hero's journey, to accomplish their goal, they've had to push further and further and further until they start stepping over the line, and somebody looking at them at that point would go, that person's now the villain.
Uh-huh.
How do you handle that? What do you do with it?
How do what?
How do you handle that? What do you do with that?
You roll with it. Oh my goodness. No, that's an awesome story. I mean, when you've got people who are perfectly decent people who are looking at your hero and based on what they've seen, it's reasonable for them to go, man, I've got to take you out. That's a good story. That's Civil War. That's Captain America Civil War. It's the same story.
I actually did that in a novel that I've not published, but what I did with that is I had a son who was rebelling against his father and eventually had the opportunity to take revenge and crossed the line. Did something that was wrong. And then what I did with the rest of the novel was make it a redemption story of how he gets back to being good. So there's different ways you can go with that, but it makes for a good story no matter which direction you choose to go.
And I generally have them walk right up to that line, but not quite across it. Because something either internally or externally pulls them back from that. But it's a struggle for them not to cross that line. Because crossing the line would be easy, and pulling back from it is hard.
But this isn't the villain in that case. I mean, you're describing a different sort of character.
You don't always need, like I said, you don't always need an evil villain. You just need somebody to fight. Sometimes it's cool to see Captain America and Iron Man fight.
And sometimes it's fun to have two different types of villains, going on at the same time. It's fun to have a Loki and a Thanos that are very different in the ways that they impede the main characters, and that have very different motivations, very different ways that they work. So play with that in your writing as well. Sometimes it's really fun to have villains that can be foils for each other.
I was going to ask actually a question similar to what you just said. When do multiple villains work against your hero or team, and when does it devolve into Spider-Man 3?
Oops, Gollum just screwed up everything.
So two things with that. One, the villains have to be distinct. And two, it really helps if there's multiple heroes, so that different villains can be impeding different heroes or in different ways.
Oh, I know. I'll rebut that with Spider-Man and the Sinister Six. Well, really, I was just a big Spider-Man fan for a long time when I was a kid. And that was one of the things that, one of the groups that Spidey had to fight was the Sinister Six. And they would always, Sinister Syndicate, or the Six Syndicate, I don't know, they kept changing the name. Spidey kept making fun of them for it, which I admired him for. But the idea was each of these villains had their own kind of villainy, but Spider-Man, had his own kind of, had his own whatever it was that would help him overcome them. It's like, the Vulture's dragging Spider-Man on a web line again, or the Green Goblin's dragging Spider-Man on a web line again. Okay, he's going to use one of his typical Spider-Man things to counter it. And then the fun part was, especially when you'd see him defeat lots of villains, one at a time, because the early part of Spider-Man's career was always a one-at-a-time villain. And then they started dropping more and more in on him because people just liked Spider-Man too much, and also because he was unreasonably powerful. But it was something that you believed the challenge it provided. My favorite Spider-Man villain is not any of them, but actually my favorite villain was Morlun It was the one Straczynski wrote for Spider-Man. The guy who was going to feed on Spider-Man's life energy and was unstoppable and not like super strong, but he could hang with Spider-Man, but just unkillable and just kept coming. And so they had this 6-episode arc of Spider-Man fighting this guy and winning, and the guy just walking through whatever it was Spider-Man had thrown at him. You know, at one point Spider-Man got a break because he burned off the guy's clothes. And the guy's like, you know, I don't want to do this not well dressed, so I'm going to be back. I'm going to see you in a couple hours, but first I'm going to go get a new suit on. Like that. And it's like, now that's a villain that you, okay, that's awesome. It's just that kind of,
He's got panache.
that implacable, unstoppable villain who's like, you know what, I can stop and do this because I am going to keep coming. You know, like that.
Okay, but every time you add a character to your story, you're adding space / chapters / pages to your novel. And be wary of the book that turns into a trilogy, that turns into 7 books, that turns into people banging on George R. R. Martin's virtual door, yelling, when are you going to finish this? So, you know, contain the story and be aware of where it's going, is all. You can have as many characters, as many villains as you want, just know where you're going with it.
Yeah, just know your end game. That's really important.
Outlining is super, it's a wonderful tool for keeping all that.
Yeah, even if you use a minimum outline.
Yeah.
I mean, the minimum outline that I think you can work with is knowing the beginning of your story and the end of your story and like the big part in the middle. And once you know that, then you can kind of get there. It's like driving from, you know, it'd be like driving from Kansas City to LA. How am I going to get? I don't know every step of the way from Kansas City to LA, but I know I'm going to get on I-70 and go west. You know, and that's how it works. You know, writing, same thing. You need to know your general direction. You need to know your destination.
And the fun part's getting there.
And torturing people.
We don't say that out loud.
What we just did.
You do all the time.
We all know it, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so what is the value, not to single out Mr. Butcher, but what is the value, especially with someone like Nicodemus or Marcon, who's implacable, or with other villains that you guys know who are always put together? What's the value in cutting them down finally, and how do you decide where to do that in your story?
At the end.
One, you're making some assumptions. Yeah, you've got to plan it for him, and you've got it just like with your hero. Your hero gets the ending that he serves up for himself ultimately, and your villain is the same way. The ultimate weapon for dealing with villains is irony. You know, you got to kick Dr. What's his face back and do his robot making machine in Metropolis. You know, Gollum. He finally gets his ring and it kills him. Yeah, etc.
Okay. That said, there is something supremely satisfying about seeing somebody get